Welcome to the final part of our heritage talk on Mercote Marsh and Fosse Way. I'm Natasha and I work at Wessex Archaeology. I'm joined by Helen Chittock from AOC Archaeology, part of Connect, and Emma Carter from Wessex Archaeology.
Brilliant. So this is perhaps our next test, which is what animal is this? So Helen, do you want to sort of take us through some of the bones of what we can see on this slide and the next?
Absolutely. So the bones from this animal, again assessed by Matilda Holmes. This animal is represented by something called the radio ulna. Now, in humans, you have the radius and the ulna, and those two bones make up your forearm. In this particular animal, they're actually fused together as one, and then they join up to the humerus, which is your upper arm bone. And in these images, you can see a little bit of that radio ulna and a little bit of the humerus. And I think if we go on to the next slide, I hope that won't give it away. No, it doesn't. Good. We can see from the same animal the left-hand side and the right-hand side of its pelvis as well. So you can see, if you've ever looked at a picture of a human skeleton, you can see that this animal is very much has a very different anatomy, and it's obviously pretty tiny as well. You can see from the scale.
Yeah, you can see it's very, very boned. So this animal probably doesn't have rickets. It's actually designed to be this way. It's also worth pointing out that it's extremely small, isn't it? It's a very tiny animal. We can actually reveal that this animal is a frog. So yeah, this is the frog, and we can see highlighted here on this drawing the different parts of the skeleton that Helen was talking about. The frog was found within the drip gully of the roundhouse. So we think what we know about frogs, they like things to be kind of moist, damp areas, and we know that the site is quite prone to being quite muddy and quite wet because of the clay as well. So the frog probably had quite a nice time living there until it met some sort of end. We don't know how that frog died, but it's really interesting to see how it tells us about the wider habitat of the area as well. So when we find animal bones like frogs and mice, we can build up an idea of what the habitat was like. We can get evidence of seeds, grain, and even pollen to provide further information of how the past actually looked like. So archaeological features can reveal the shape of the past, and the finds and environmental evidence, you can go so far as telling us what it smelt like. So the next image we're going to show you is of Fosse Way, but not as you know it. So that frog has come back to life. I'm not sure for how long, as it is being squeezed quite excitedly by a child right in the foreground. So this is a reconstruction of Fosse Way. We can pick out those rather naughty goats that I was thinking about earlier, surrounding the enclosure. That fence is doing a good job for now, but they look like they might be quite determined. We can also pick out from this the entrance to structure 2. So this is the roundhouse where we found the human bone in the gully there. We can see that within the interior of the roundhouse there is a hearth, and there's someone actually sweeping out those hearth remains into the wider area of the settlement. So if we find things like a concentration of charcoal or a disbursement of charcoal, that helps reinforce what those interior structures that don't often survive may have been doing within that roundhouse itself. We can also see there is a lady out the front, and we've got these 2 lovely big posts coming up with that beam going across and 2 kind of goat heads. So we're trying to allude here is some of the more common everyday rituals that we might encounter in this period. She's also cooking and preparing food. She may even be getting some goat milk as well. Now, if you can bring your eye further now into the background, you can see again that kind of like rugby football post, that sort of back gateway there. And then you'll just see the beams coming in of structure 1. So structure 1, if you can recall from the earlier reconstruction, was that lower, wider shape. So what we're trying to conjure here and give an idea is that when we find archaeological features on site, just because we found it in one dig doesn't necessarily mean it was all there at the same time. there are different phases to the occupation, and even a settlement with such a concentrated lifetime as this would still have had different phases to it. So we think it's likely that that structure one rather had different phases to it, and there's nothing that would say that one roundhouse was built at exactly the same time as another. So much like in modern housing developments, where you'll get a cluster of houses built first, and if you go further around the estate and building site, you'll see some houses being built. So roundhouses have a limited shelf life, and you might have one in a state of disrepair whilst you've got your current one to live in.
Thank you. So I'll go over to Helen for the final finds, and we've got you some 3D models to show on Sketchfab as well.
Lovely, thank you, Natasha. Some of our colleagues at AOC Archaeology have produced some really brilliant 3D digital images of a few of finds from Fosse Way and Mercote Marsh farm. This is an example. This vessel is represented by just one sherd. You can see it's one sherd from the very rim of the vessel, and this one's from Fosse Way. The pottery assemblage from this site was examined by Phil Mills, and Phil was able to look at that single sherd and suggest that it was from a really large large possible cauldron or bowl, and he's actually suggested that could be indicative of communal cooking and communal eating. So I think that says something really nice about the kind of social life at the site at Fosse Way.
I'll just say these models are on a site called Sketchfab, and I think a lot of archaeological companies use Sketchfab to put 3D models so the public can see them. So do have a look online at Sketchfab.
This one was identified by Phil Mills as possibly being a sherd of something called scordware. That's a type of Iron Age pottery which is decorated in lots of very fine scored lines, and it's commonly found in the East Midlands. So the fact that it's appearing at Fosse Way suggests that it might have been kind of exchanged or traded at some point, and there's a possibility it might have arrived to the site possibly on the riverways. Has been a suggestion. So that's just a nice illustration of the kind of trade and exchange that might be taking place. Iron Age pottery is sometimes fairly soft and quite easily broken, and pots certainly would have broken accidentally on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure. I think there are some possible examples, not from these sites, but from wider Iron Age archaeology, of maybe pots being deliberately broken, or at least of the fragments being very deliberately placed into deposits, suggesting that there's a little bit more going on than just kind of disposal. And in terms of repurposing, pots are sometimes ground down to create a sort of powdered product called grog, which is then sometimes incorporated into clay to make new pots. So that's a nice way of kind of pots kind of living on in new pots as grog. So yeah, it's certainly a complex picture going on there.
Thank you for watching our Heritage Talk on Mercote Marsh and Fosse Way. Keep an eye out for future Heritage Talks across our social media channels.